So Gompa Services in India had asked me to give a few talks, and we decided, to do this as part of the course, because finding another time for me to give 4 long talks was getting difficult. Okay, so a few minutes of silent meditation. Generate your own motivation now, rather than having me lead you through it. So I can't remember the first time I heard. When was the first time I heard teachings on these verses from Chandrakirti? But what I do remember is every time I've heard them, they've really impacted me, especially the last couple of verses have been very, very strong. So it's quite beautiful. Let's read them together. Yeah, there. And I think you have the sheet. Oops. We'll read them together and then I'll explain them. Okay. The hearers and solitary realizers arise from the excellent sages, the Buddhas. The excellent sages are born from bodhisattvas, the compassionate mind and the non-dual awareness, as well as the awakening mind. These are the causes of bodhisattvas. Compassion alone is seen as the seed of a conqueror's rich harvest, as water that nourishes it, and as the ripened fruit that is its source of long enjoyment. Therefore, at the start, I praise compassion. Like a paddle wheel in motion, migrators have no autonomy. First, with the thought I, they cling to a self. Then, with the thought mind, they become attached to things. I bow to this compassion that cares for migrators. Homage to that compassion for migrators, seen as effervescent, fluctuating, and empty of inherent existence, like the reflection of the moon in rippling water. The compassionate mind and the non-dual awareness, as well as the awakening mind, these are the causes of bodhisattvas. Okay, so please change where it says awakening mind, change that to bodhicitta. Is awakening mind what is on the one downstairs? It says awakening mind on that one. It says bodhicitta. Yeah, I don't like the expression awakening mind. It makes me think, you're groggy and you wake up from bodhicitta. We know what bodhicitta is. Okay.
Also changed, I read it like conquerors, they changed the victors.
I changed what?
Changed conquerors to victors. You thought it was less.
Victors, yeah. Okay. Of a victor's rich harvest. The reason for that is when I've taught in Mexico, conquerors, conquistadores, and nobody likes conquistadores. So victor over the afflictions, that makes sense. Conquistadores, okay. And then also, we'll get to this later, but And the third verse, it says like a paddle wheel in motion. But when I've learned it, it's been like a bucket in a well. Okay. Geshe-la, what do you think?
It has many buckets.
Yeah, that's
It is a wheel on which many buckets are attached, so that when they fall down, they come up with waters filled in it,
yeah.
and then it pours out.
Okay. But a paddle wheel is like on a boat that has those kind of buckets, and it makes the boat go forward. Is it like that, or it's just referring to buckets in a well? Because it makes more sense to me when it refers to buckets in a well, when it's getting banged on the side and all.
In a very simple form, sometimes they come in different sophisticated structures. In a very simple form, it could be a wheel up at top, where there could be a kind of a pulley, where just one bucket could be pulled down.
Right.
But sometimes they make it into so many buckets with some animal pulling.
Oh,
What do you
okay.
call, pushing the going round, so that the wheel will go, and with that the buckets get moved and filled and emptied,
see.
like that.
I think the first example that you gave more fits the meaning, because it talks about banging
Yes,
against
yes.
the walls. It talks about the pulley being controlled by
yes,
the pulley. Okay, so can we put like buckets in a well, make it plural, or bucket in a well?
Wheel of buckets, something like that.
Like a wheel.
It has to have wheel, I think.
It has to have wheel?
Yeah.
Can't wheel be implied? There's already so many words we put in that are implied. Can't wheel also be implied? Okay, like
What we can do is look up for pictures of them. I have seen some of them,
yeah.
and depending on which seems to be fitting well with that elaborate description, the analogies, it would be good to choose, and then call it by a modern name, or not necessarily by any archaic name.
Yeah. Yeah, if somebody can look up what is a wheel of buckets. Anyway,
I have seen some pictures.
yeah.
So I'll look up
Okay, if you
and then share with.
yeah. Okay. Because I don't think a paddle wheel, the one with ships, that doesn't have a pulley, and that doesn't bang against the sides of the well.
While we are speaking of these verses that I see down there, I've shared this with some of the people also, that the last one could also be four-lined. In the original itself has it in such a way that if we were to put the fourth one there, it would look uncompleted, with the next one being led to, but it could be made into such that that it will also be four-lined.
Okay. Right now it's 4 lines. Yeah.
The last one. No, even down there. Even down there, so the last one has only three lines.
In here it's written as 4.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then that may be the main text, the text itself, Tibetan text itself, whereas here it has taken some liberty in paying homage to the compassion. Whereas
I see. Okay.
There it refers to how bodhisattvas, seeing beings in these forms, are pulled, driven by compassion.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it ends.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, it's you're getting a sense of how difficult translation is, and especially if you want to adhere to the form of the original, it gets tricky. Anyway. Okay, so we this morning and also yesterday, I believe or the day before, we started speaking about compassion. And in these verses and in other times of mentioning compassion, also often people in the Mahayana text will say compassion, but they're actually referring to great compassion. And we'll get into the meaning of great compassion a little bit later. So you can think that even when it says compassion here. So compassion is something we all see as something good, but we don't understand it very well. And very often people are afraid to be compassionate because they're afraid they're going to be overwhelmed by seeing the misery of other people. So they back away from compassion out of fear. And so we have to understand what compassion is. Many people in the West like to explain the etymology of the word compassion, which means come is with and passion suffer. So compassion means you suffer with others. I don't like when people put forth that etymology of an English word because it misconstrues how I understand or what I understand compassion to be from a Buddhist perspective. Because suffering with somebody, you suffer, okay? And you're suffering with them, and the idea is you never feel better until they feel better. So you're somehow chained together. And where we go from there is into this feeling of personal distress. Okay, I suffer with somebody, so I am distressed. I am unhappy. I am, I can't stop crying. Yeah, out of compassion. Now, I know that sometimes in the teachings, they'll say, they'll compare compassion, Mahayana compassion, to like the feeling for a mother for her child and this feeling, of strong bond and we cannot bear the compassion, okay? So the using of that kind of words, you can't bear compassion. Yeah, you are suffering with them. It for me, that kind of language moves the mind into compassion being very unpleasant and very obsessive and all-consuming. And that's not the Buddhist meaning of compassion. They'll use that language, like a mother despairing over her child. Or another image is a mother without arms who sees her child floating down a river, So you get that kind of thing. They're using that to indicate the intensity, okay, but not the quality of the compassion, okay? I think Mahayana compassion has to be something where your mind is balanced, because if you fall into despair, you fall, and you're despairing and you're panicked and you're freaked out and you're suffering with that person, and it's just a terrible thing that's going on. Yeah, you're so overwhelmed by your own suffering, your own feeling of aversion, that you can't help anybody. Yeah. So, compassion does not mean that we have fallen into self-despair. And I think from also the compassion of bodhisattvas, there's optimism in there. Okay, because bodhisattvas know that samsara has a cause, and it knows that samsara's cause can be eliminated. And when the cause is eliminated, the cause, fundamental cause being the ignorance grasping true existence, when that's eliminated, all the afflictions that create so much negative karma, and all the karma that's created by the afflictions, all of that is like the domino effect. It all goes blub, 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 crash. Okay. So bodhisattvas know that misery can be eliminated. So therefore they don't despair. They know it's going to take a long time to lead sentient beings out of liberation, out of samsara to liberation or to full awakening. But they know that there's a method to do that. So there's no despair. There's no depression. Yeah. There's a lot of joyous effort to continue benefiting sentient beings for eon after eon, even though sentient beings often don't listen. Yeah, but they have that strength to keep doing that. Yeah. Whereas if you are, freaked out like a mother is about her ill child, you can't help anybody. Yeah. Okay. So we have to understand what compassion is. Yeah. And so that's one aspect of it. Another aspect is it doesn't mean feeling sorry for somebody. It doesn't mean pitying somebody. Oh, you poor person, look what you have. Life is so unfair. Poor you. Oh. It's not sappy and sentimental. Yeah. Because again, if you're sappy and sentimental, oh, poor baby, oh, gotta fix you up. Oh, yeah. If compassion is like that, then again, it's gooey, it's sticky, it's it's permeated with clinging and attachment and pity and actually condescension. Yeah, because when we feel sorry for somebody, because we often say, oh, I feel so sorry for somebody, meaning I have compassion for them. Feeling sorry for someone is different than compassion. Feeling sorry is, oh, that poor person. Yeah, I feel so bad, but I'm separate from that person. That person is suffering. They're worthy of pity. But I'm separate. I'm unrelated. And maybe I'm a little bit better looking down on that person who has so much trauma. This is not the Buddhist concept of compassion. There's no condescension. Yeah, and here's where I really like Shantideva's image of a thorn stuck in a foot and the hand pulling it out. Okay, the hand doesn't look at the foot and say, "Oh, poor foot! You were walking along and you stepped on a rusty nail. Poor baby." Yeah, but me, I'm the great and glorious hand. And I've taken how many thorns, how many rusty nails out of you know, foot before, and you still continue to do the same stupid thing, you idiot, instead of listening to me when I tell you to watch where you're going. But I'm the kind, compassionate hand, and I'm going to reach down and pull that nail out. And remember that I helped you because you owe me one. Okay? That is not compassion. Okay? Neither the condescension nor the you owe me one. Yeah. So we have to be very clear about what compassion means. Otherwise, we get really, we go in circles. Yeah. And we can't approach a situation clearly. Just to give you an example, when we are overwhelmed with attachment or longing or grief, how we actually can't help people very much. Okay, so some years ago, a friend of mine was dying, and his wife, called me and let me know. And I had known him for many years and respected him a lot. He'd been here to the Abbey. And so I said, do you want me to come? They were in California. And she said yes. So I went down, and he was on on a ventilator. He had been sedated because apparently it's quite uncomfortable to be on a ventilator. But they pulled him out of the sedation for a moment, and his wife asked him, are you ready to go, or do you want to keep fighting this? Because he had had several incidents. There was an organ transplant, and one thing after another kept going bad. And he said, let me go. So the hospital was very good. They wheeled him into another room. And so his wife followed, his 2 kids, adult kids, and his best friend, who also was a friend of mine, and me. So there were 5 of us that followed him into the other room. And since it had to do with his lungs, stopping, taking him off the vent, he would die. And they said that it's very uncomfortable dying in that way because you feel like you're getting strangled. You can't breathe. So there was, I figured out later that the other person standing next to me over him was a nurse giving, I think Venerable Jigme would have been morphine, something like that, so that he didn't feel any distress when he was dying. Yeah. I have another opinion about that altogether, but that's not part of the story. Anyway, so I was standing right with him as he was dying, and giving him instructions how to think and what to remember and so on. And his wife, his 2 kids, his best friend were, on the other side of him a few feet away. And they were all crying, and they couldn't help him because they were too overwhelmed themselves with the grief of losing him. Yeah. So it really, for me, was quite a clear example of how important it is to be very clear-minded when you have compassion and not, fall apart. Because what can you do when you fall apart, when it's your pain now that's consuming your mind? And so your attention is not on the other person, it's on yourself and your own pain. Another time when I was in Singapore, a family asked me to go. One of the family members was dying. They were in the bedroom, and the rest of the family was in the living room. And they asked me to come and help the dying person. However, when I got there, the family was in such emotional turmoil that I couldn't get to the person in the bedroom who was the one dying, because the family needed help right then and there. Okay. So I saw, wow, the person who's dying is the person who needs the most help at this moment, because that's a really important time in their life, the moment of death. But the family, out of compassion, they called me out of compassion for their relative, but they were so distressed themselves that I couldn't. It took me, I don't know, a half an hour, 45 minutes to get in the room of the person who was dying, because the family, they stopped me in the room and I had to help them first. Okay. So I'm telling these stories to give you some kind of real life example of what compassion can mean and what it doesn't mean. Okay. Yeah, definitely there's a very strong feeling with compassion, but there's hope, okay, or optimism. Optimism may be a better word. Hope is what you do when you can't find anything good to think about. Optimism is, where you have a good attitude and towards it. Okay. Then also, another point in thinking about compassion is, we all, hopefully we all, some of you may not, remember the 3 kinds of dukkha that's taught in the Lamrim. The dukkha of pain, which is physical and mental pain that everybody, even the animals, experience and know it's undesirable. Then the dukkha of change, which is the fact that we experience pleasure and happiness in samsara. But if we do the thing that gives us happiness long enough, it becomes suffering. Okay. Yeah. And here chocolate is a really good example. Yeah, you're craving chocolate. You want chocolate. You eat chocolate. You're so happy. And you keep eating it and keep eating it and keep eating it. And what's the end result? I feel terrible. Yeah. So what it's showing is that if chocolate really brought true happiness, the more we ate it, the happier we would be. But it doesn't bring true happiness, because the more we eat it, eventually we get a stomach ache and we're kind of miserable. So that's the case with any kind of happiness we have in samsara. Yeah. So the Buddha didn't teach us this so that we could be depressed. Okay. And say, oh, there's no real happiness in samsara. It's all going to devolve into dukkha. A Buddha he doesn't need to teach us how to be depressed. Okay. We do that all by our little old selves. Yeah. So, that's compassion shouldn't have that ring of depression and forlorn and hopeless. Bodhisattvas have optimism because they know the cause of samsara can be stopped, can be eradicated. And then the 3rd kind of dukkha, the pervasive dukkha of conditioning, refers to our 5 aggregates. Yeah, the body, the physical aggregate, the 4 mental aggregates constitute mind. So they're feeling, discrimination, miscellaneous factors, and consciousness. Yeah. So just the fact of having our body and mind means that we are always susceptible to big dukkha. Okay, that even in the times like right now, we're in the human realm and the sun is shining and everything's good, except we have to think about what the Supreme Court is doing, but scratch that out for a while. Everything's good and life is fine. Buddha says this is a form of dukkha. It's unsatisfactory because at any split second, karma could ripen and we're thrown into big dukkha. Okay. And here you can think of all the people who woke up this morning thinking, oh, it's a sunny day and I'm going out. It's Saturday. I'm going to go do something fun. And they wind up getting in car accidents instead. Yeah. So we don't know what's going to happen. All the people who thought today was going to be a fun day and they had heart attacks or strokes. So the idea being that with this third kind of dukkha, there's no security in samsara. Okay. Yeah. So one of the things of generating compassion is we often think only of compassion for the first kind of dukkha. People are suffering. There's a war in Ukraine. There's starvation in the Middle East and in Africa. There's, climate destruction. There are people in the hospital having all kinds of things. Yeah. And there's people having emotional breakdowns and so on. Okay. So we only tend to think of that kind of very gross dukkha as dukkha. Okay. And that's why I don't like to translate the Tibetan, the Sanskrit term dukkha as suffering, because those people don't, if you ask them, are you suffering today? They'd say, no, today I'm fine. But yeah, dukkha doesn't mean suffering like that. It means unsatisfactory circumstances. If you ask that same person, are there unsatisfactory circumstances surrounding your life? You bet they say yes. Okay. So we have to make sure when we're meditating on compassion that we don't just stay with the people who have very obvious physical and mental suffering. Okay. One reason for that is that then our compassion becomes very biased. Yeah. We have compassion for the poor, for the injured. Yeah. Do we have compassion for the rich? No. We think that they're, people who are dishonest and oppress other people and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Actually, if you've ever been around rich people for any period of time, they have their own kind of suffering. Yeah. People who are successful in society have their own suffering. Yeah. Because as soon as you make it big, you have to maintain that. It is not easy to maintain your big status. Okay, just ask who wants to get his big status back in 2024. Okay, you have to maintain that status, and it's stressful to maintain it. Yeah, and if you don't maintain it, then look what happens. I'm a loser. Oh, I can't be a loser. Only losers are losers. I'm not a loser. I'm successful. The whole thing was rigged. Okay. But what about compassion for a person who has that way of thinking and who thinks that that's going to bring him happiness? I mean, how confused and tormented is such a mind that thinks like that? You see, but if we only think of compassion as somebody that, somebody broke their leg or they're getting a divorce, then you don't have compassion for somebody like that. You call them every name in the book, and even names that aren't in the book. Okay. But our compassion becomes very biased. Yeah. And also, when we have compassion only for the ill or injured, very often we have compassion, but we don't want to get too involved. Yeah. Have you ever had Aunt Ethel, who's 80 something? She's in the hospital. Yeah, she usually smells bad. She's had dementia for a while. She's really sick. Yeah, she's your aunt, and her child says, "Please come with me to visit Aunt Ethel." And you go, "Oh, I don't want to go in the hospital. The hospital is scary. That's where you go to die, and Aunt Ethel's on the way to die, and she has dementia anyway, and I can't, that just drives me crazy. It makes me afraid because I might get dementia." Yeah. And so there's resistance to going and seeing Aunt Ethel. Okay. Because we have so much compassion for her suffering as long as she's at a distance. Okay. So to really have compassion for somebody, it takes a lot of work on our part. Yeah. To have genuine compassion that is going to stick there throughout whatever the person's going through. And a compassion that has so much fortitude that you're not going to give up halfway. Okay. In other words, you have compassion for somebody who has a medical problem, and you have the perfect way to treat them for their medical problem. Okay. Because your friend's aunt or uncle, 4 times removed, had this certain folk remedy that is absolutely 100% infallible. Like taking hydrochloroquine, was that the name of it? Yeah. And you know how to cure this person's illness, but other people don't want to give it to them. And the other person doesn't want your help. They don't want to take hydrochloroquine. They want to take Clorox. Okay. So then you get frustrated. But I know how to treat this. I'm telling you what's good for you. Why are you rejecting it? And then you go completely berserky because you say, "I'm being so compassionate and they won't listen to me. Those beep, beep, beep." And then you start getting angry and frustrated at them. Yeah, your compassion it goes south. Yeah, because you're fed up. Like, why don't you people do what I say and listen to me? Or you're trying to help somebody, who's dying, who doesn't have the attorney, power of attorney, who doesn't have a will, who doesn't have any of this. And you're trying to say, please fill it out. And they don't want to. Yeah. When my dad was in his late 80s, early 90s, we tried to get him to give up the car keys. Failed. He didn't want to sign a power. He has power of attorney, but a medical will. He didn't want to do that one. Only his doctor finally convinced him after a long time to do one. Yeah. But if you have that kind of person that you're helping, it's like, Dad, you can't drive. You're going to get in a wreck. You're going to kill somebody else and kill yourself. But you can't say that to Dad because you know what you're going to hear in response. Okay. So you try every possible way to show your compassion, to get him to please, you've driven for so many years, Dad. Let us drive you. Give us the keys. No. Okay. So you have to have the ability to not get frustrated and throw the whole thing away. Okay. It's tempting sometimes, but you can't do it. So really generating compassion, it's not something sentimental. It entails an incredible kind of fortitude in the mind and clarity, and it has to be combined with wisdom. If the compassion is not combined with wisdom, then, with all of our wonderful compassion, we go in and we make a royal mess of the situation. We give bad advice, we create factions, all in the name of acting out of compassion. So we have to be quite careful. Okay. So that's just a little introduction. So in the verses, the homage to compassion, to great compassion that we just read, the first verses, talks about how compassion is the root of all goodness. Okay, so we'll do it one verse at a time. Shravakas and solitary realizers arise, sometimes it says, are born from the excellent sages. Instead of arise. I'm used to it saying are born from. Anyway, arise from the excellent sages, meaning the Buddhas. The excellent sages are born from bodhisattvas. The mind of compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta, these are the causes of bodhisattvas. Okay. So this is at the beginning of Chandrakirti's text. And in the text, it's about the 10 perfections, the 10 paramitas, and the majority of the text is spent on the 6th paramita, the one of Sharab, of wisdom. Okay, and it's a long chapter, and that's the real juicy tofu part of the text. Okay, so. It's interesting, at the beginning of it, he's not paying homage to Manjushri, who's the Buddha of wisdom. He's not paying homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. He's paying homage to great compassion. Okay, so that's saying something right there. Then he starts saying, the Shravakas and solitary realizers are born from the excellent sages, the Buddhas. The excellent sages are born from bodhisattvas. Okay, so Shravakas are hearers. Okay, the literal translation is the hearers, and it refers to people who follow the fundamental vehicle. In other words, whose aim is to become an arhat, and they hear the teachings. So they hear the Buddha's teaching, and they also share it with other people. So sometimes Shravaka can mean just hearer. Sometimes it means hearer and proclaimer, because they can even proclaim the teachings, give the teachings about supreme awakening and the path to Buddhahood, even though they themselves don't follow it. Okay, so Shravaka can have that meaning as well. Solitary realizers are another kind of fundamental vehicle practitioner who aspires to become an arhat. They're called solitary realizers because in their last lifetime, when they attain the arhatship of a solitary realizer, they do so at a time in what is called a dark eon. In other words, a historical time, when there's no Buddha who has appeared in the world and taught. So they are solitary in that sense, okay? They don't have a community around them, although some might, but most don't. They don't have a teacher in that last lifetime, but they've certainly done all the work previously and, have made that kind of dedication prayer to be in a solitary situation in their last lifetime. And I think some of them may live in communities, and there's one kind called the rhinoceros ones, who supposedly live alone. But I don't know. I've seen rhinoceroses in zoos, and rhinoceroses, they seem to have friends around. Okay. So they are born from the excellent sages, from the Buddhas. What does it mean that, Buddha's celibate? He doesn't have any kids. How are they born from him? Okay. What it means is that the Buddha has the teachings and the experience of the full path to awakening. And so he teaches it to the Shravakas and the solitary realizers. And in that way, they are born from the words that the Buddha teaches them. Okay, so their states of realization depend on hearing the teachings from the Buddha. Okay. So Shravakas and solitary realizers, they may have immeasurable compassion, and they may even teach immeasurable compassion because they've heard the teachings from the Buddha. But they themselves lack the compassion that shoulders the responsibility to lead all beings to liberation. So they have compassion. I mean, our friends who are Theravada practitioners, they'll meditate a lot on mostly metta meditation, meaning loving kindness. That one is more popular than the other three of the four immeasurables, but they meditate on compassion too. And, so they may generate compassion, but immeasurable compassion means for all countless sentient beings. Okay. Whereas the way compassion is usually taught in the fundamental vehicle, you start with developing it towards one or two individuals, and then you expand it. In our tradition, we start with equanimity, equalizing our feeling towards all sentient beings, and from there, meditate on love and compassion. So it's a different kind of order because the kind of compassion we want to generate is towards all living beings. Okay. So, so Shravakas and solitary realizers may have immeasurable compassion, but they don't want to take the responsibility of liberating sentient beings. Yeah. And when I stayed in Thailand some years ago to do some research for the books by His Holiness, the people I met there would talk about different people in Thailand who had compassion. And the abbot of the monastery where I was staying, he was very famous for having metta, loving kindness. Yeah, so it's definitely something that's there in their tradition that most people in the Mahayana traditions don't know about. Yeah, because we are usually told, oh, those people are Hinayana, lesser vehicle. They're selfish. Okay, so this term Hinayana, which does translate as lesser vehicle, His Holiness doesn't use that term anymore. Okay, he says fundamental vehicle. And I think that's much more accurate because it shows that the Mahayana depends on the fundamental vehicle. In other words, Mahayana is not a totally different Buddhist tradition, unrelated to the Pali tradition or unrelated to Theravada. Yeah, but rather it shares so many of the foundational teachings, but it adds on the teachings about bodhicitta. That is very special. Okay. And I won't get into the wisdom side, the differences. That's not our topic right now. Okay, so so the Shravakas and the solitary realizers, they can gain their arhatship, their liberation. The Pali tradition says 7 lives at maximum. The Sanskrit tradition says 3 lives. Okay, and the solitary realizers amass a lot of merit. That we talk about the collections of merit and wisdom. They amass a lot of merit and a lot of wisdom, but it's not the collections of merit and wisdom, because to be the collections of these two, it has to be supported by bodhicitta, and they don't have the bodhicitta. So it's called, so what they have is called secondary collections of merit and wisdom, not the fully qualified ones that bodhisattvas develop. Okay, so when it says, so we just talked about Shravakas and solitary realizers are born from the excellent Buddhas. Then the next line is the excellent sages, the Buddhas, are born from bodhisattvas. And you go, huh? Okay, I understand how Shravakas, hearers and solitary realizers, are born from hearing the teachings of the Buddha. But how is the Buddha born from a bodhisattva? Because a Buddha has a higher, is more highly realized than a bodhisattva. So here the meaning of the word born or arise from is different, okay? Because when we say that Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas, it means that you have, one bodhisattva here, okay? So our bodhisattva named Pat. That's a nice gender equal term. Yeah, name anyway. Our bodhisattva named Pat. Okay, so Pat can, when Pat practices and, amasses the 2 collections, then Pat becomes a Buddha. So that Buddha arises from from Pat in the sense that they're both on the same mental continuum. Okay, so this mental continuum on the bodhisattva in one life was called Pat. Yeah, when that mind stream was completely purified, it became, Pat became a Buddha named, I don't know, yeah, whatever you want to call that Buddha. Okay. Yeah, Buddhas have interesting names when you translate their names. Yeah, quite interesting. Okay, so maybe he's Buddha pat on the back to encourage you. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so it's in that way that the Buddhas are born from the bodhisattvas. another way that we can say the Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas is you have two bodhisattvas, okay? And one bodhisattva teaches or encourages the other bodhisattva. And then that bodhisattva becomes a Buddha. So then that Buddha is born from the bodhisattva that guided him or gave him or her advice. Okay, so that's another meaning of Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas. Okay, so one, that they're in the same substantial continuum, and the other, that one is helping the other. Okay. Okay, so then the next section is talking about the three principal causes of bodhisattvas. Yeah. So Chandrakirti continues. He says, the mind of compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta, these are the causes of bodhisattvas. Okay, sounds good. Yeah? Just wait. Okay, so this is based on Chandrakirti saying this on a passage from Nagarjuna in Precious Garland, where Nagarjuna says, if you and the world wish to attain unparalleled awakening, its roots are the altruistic aspiration to awakening, bodhicitta, firm like monarch of mountains, compassion reaching to all quarters, and wisdom not relying on duality. So Nagarjuna himself mentions these three causes. Okay, so compassion for each and every sentient being throughout space, omitting none. Okay, so if you omit one grasshopper, one politician, one mosquito, then no bodhicitta, no awakening. So it depends on compassion for each and every sentient being. Yeah. So it's much easier to generate compassion towards the people we like. Yeah. It's so much easier. Yeah. Strangers, as long as they're far away, kind of on the other side of the planet, and I don't have to really live with them, in their refugee camps, or live with them on the street, or live with them in the medical clinics that are filthy. As long as there's a distance, I can have some compassion for strangers. Enemies, people who threaten me, who I don't like, who have harmed me, that is another story. Compassion for them, are you kidding? After what they did to me and how much they hurt me, they deserve to be hit by a truck. And then we have the very popular explanation, which you hear all over the place, of go to hell. How many times in your life have you heard people say go to hell? And they probably mean it, They're mad. They wish suffering on somebody else. That's a difficult mind to work with, isn't it? Because we can't have that kind of anger and hatred towards somebody and at the same time be compassionate towards them. Those two mental factors cannot exist in the mind at the same time. As long as we hold a grudge, as long as we're even subtly, although we won't say it out loud, but we're still wishing that they go to hell or get hit by a truck or whatever, if that is still in our mind, then we can't generate compassion for them. Without compassion for one sentient being, we can't generate bodhicitta. Without bodhicitta, there's no awakening. Okay, so our awakening depends on sentient beings, and it depends I think especially on the people that it's so difficult to have compassion for. Yeah, because those people are the key ones. Compassion for the people we like, that's not so much of a problem. Yeah, there it may turn into personal distress, but, we wish them well. So we have to work a lot on forgiveness. Yeah. I don't see the specific word forgiveness as a translation term in many of the teachings, but His Holiness sure talks about it a lot. Yeah. And when you delve into the meaning of patience or fortitude as the antidote to anger, then, you see that the whole idea of forgiveness is really there. Yeah. So can we forgive the people who harmed us? Can we let go of things 10, 20 years after they've happened? Yeah. Or are we holding on to that very strongly? And that person is permanent. They haven't changed. They have this fixed personality, and I'm sure if I associate with them again, they will stab me in the back once more. Therefore, I am not speaking to them. I am not meeting with them. They can go to hell for all I care. Ever heard that before? Okay. My family has a particularly interesting history with holding grudges. Yeah, such that when there is something to celebrate in a worldly way in my family, you cannot make a seating chart for all the guests. You cannot have the family all together. Thank you for agreeing. Okay. Because this one doesn't speak to that one, and that one doesn't speak to this one. And you thought that this one and that one got along, but they had a fight last week and now they don't talk to each other. And it doesn't matter whether they're brothers or sisters or parents or kids, when they take a vow not to speak to that person again, they never break that vow. I come from a great family. There's a lot of kind people in my family, but there's also this streak of, I don't know what you want to call it, running through all of that. Yeah, it's really kind of strange, yeah, to put it gently. Okay. So we have to deal with our grudges. We have to forgive people. Yeah. When we hold grudges, what's going on in our mind? Okay. How do we see the self that's holding the grudge? I can't stand them. They hurt me. If you're looking for the object of negation in the emptiness meditation, you got it. Okay. This strong me, I'm inherently existent and they harm me. And they also are inherently existent and they are permanent. They have a permanent character, a permanent disposition. They do the same thing again to me, So I'm cutting them out. Basta finito. Done. Okay. So, we stab ourselves in the foot when we do that. Yeah. Because we're miserable now. We can't gain bodhicitta. Yeah. What pleasure do we get from holding a grudge? People do things because there's some pleasure at the bottom of it. What pleasure do you get from holding a grudge? Is it this feeling of power and control? I can sever the relationship. Well, congratulations. Does that really make you happy? Or my anger towards them will make them suffer and they'll regret what they did to me. Oh, really? I just saw them at the beach with their kids. They're having a good time. When we hold a grudge, who is suffering? Is our anger harming the person we're mad at? Is our anger making them realize that they made a terrible mistake and that they should definitely come crawling back to us on their hands and knees and beg for our forgiveness? Yeah. We have this kind of mental image, don't you? There he is, that one that I can't stand, in the back of the room on his hands and knees, like he's going to, what's the church in Mexico City where everybody goes on their hands and knees? They climb up the stair. Yeah. I want to say Batica de Guadalupe. Basilica, it's the Basilica de Guadalupe. And the pilgrims go there, and there's steps leading up, and they are crawling on their hands and knees, asking for forgiveness for, their sin or whatever. So we want the person who harmed us to do that to us. Don't go to the Basilica de Guadalupe. I'm here. You can start right back there and crawl on your knees. All the way up here, crawling on your hands and knees, going, Culpa mia, I am so sorry. I harmed you so much. I know it was 40 years ago, but I've been suffering since those 40 years because I harmed you. Please, please forgive me. Isn't that somehow gratifying to your ego? After 40 years, they finally got it that they're a jerk. Yeah. And they're crawling on their hands and knees. And I am so magnanimous, so full of compassion, that I look as they're crawling on their bleeding knees, and there's hands that are scratched, with tears shedding down in grief because they are so sorry for what they did to me. And I can look at them and say, maybe I'll accept your apology. I'll think about it. Then we feel, oh, I got them. What kind of pleasure does that give you? That's a sick kind of feeling of power, isn't it? That is really disgusting. But that's often what we want. I mean, I dramatized it just a little bit. But not so much, We want them to really be sorry. Okay, but that's a big impediment to having compassion for them. Yeah, we have to let go of the anger. So then people fall into, but if I forgive them, that means I'm saying what they did was okay. No, that doesn't mean saying what they did was okay. It might have been okay, but it might have been very harmful. I say it might have been okay because often we misunderstand things that people do. They don't mean to harm, but we interpret it that way. But it could be that somebody did mean harm towards us. Yeah. all the forgiveness means is that I'm giving up my anger towards that harm. It doesn't mean that I'm saying what they did to me was okay. Okay? It just means I'm putting down my anger because I realize that my anger hurts me more than it hurts anybody else. Yeah. And I'm tired of being angry because the anger, it blocks me right, left, and center. Anything I try and do, I get annoyed, I get frustrated, I get irritated. I want to retaliate. And sometimes I explode and sometimes I implode. Okay, so forgiveness simply means, forgiveness is something we do to help ourselves. We're giving up the anger that's tormenting us. Our usual way of thinking is forgiveness is something we do for the other person. Yeah, by apologizing. But when we apologize, we cannot ensure that the other person accepts our apology and forgives us. Yeah. So if we are holding out for that person to go, yes, like giving you the holy benediction, yes, my son, my daughter, I forgive you. No. Okay. The apology comes from our getting clear in our own mind, that there is no good purpose for anger. The apology also can come from realizing that maybe, just maybe, I had something to do with the event that broke us apart. Maybe, like maybe I said something to them or I did something to them, something we don't want to admit that we played a role. We want to play innocent victim. I did absolutely nothing. These people are evil incarnated. Actually, situations happen because of multiple causes and conditions. We can't put it all on one person. Okay. But we're also not victim blaming here. Okay. But we all have some role in it. And from a Buddhist perspective, that role might have been something we did in a previous life. Yeah, we harmed other people in a previous life. This life, we're getting harmed in return. Okay. The part that's our responsibility is the karma we created in a previous life. Created out of ignorance that we haven't purified yet. And in fact, when we hold a grudge, we've nourished that karma. We've made it stronger. Okay. So forgiving is our putting down our anger. Sometimes it's good to go to the person and apologize directly to them. Sometimes they may be dead already. Does that mean that you can't forgive them? No, because forgiveness is you're changing in your own mind your attitude towards them. So instead of wishing them ill, you wish them well. You generate bodhicitta, wanting to lead them to awakening. So your whole attitude towards them has changed. And in that way, you forgive them, even if they're no longer alive to forgive, because the key thing here is that our heart has changed. We cannot make somebody else accept our apology. Because sometimes we feel really sincerely bad for something that we did to somebody. And, they're not ready to forgive. And that's okay. That's where they're at. We have to respect it. Yeah. But from our side, we're putting it down. Okay. So when other people have harmed us, we can put it down. When we have harmed them, then also forgiving ourselves. Yeah. Doing purification, owning what we did, purifying it. Maybe going to the other person and apologizing, maybe writing them a note. Okay. There's various ways depending on what the situation is towards them. Sometimes you don't know where they are. You've lost touch with them. Okay. But the important thing is that it occurred in our own heart. Yeah. So that we don't carry it around with us. Okay. So I think we will stop here today and continue tomorrow. Okay? Oh, I want to mark it in here. Okay. Any questions? We have a minute for question. Yeah?
Hi. So I was taught by Ajahn Jeff Thanissaro Bhikkhu about metta as a form of, this is in reference to you talking about the dukkha of change in reference to ice cream or chocolate, how doing it again and again creates suffering. He gave a teaching that metta is like printing money that never gets inflated. Like when you do metta practice, it just grows and grows, and that's the definition of immeasurable. So is there no suffering in generating metta? And is compassion when you have metta for those who are suffering? Is that what the definition of it?
Metta means love. Okay. So love, from...
just to clarify, his definition of metta is goodwill, and compassion is goodwill directed towards those who are suffering, while joy is goodwill directed towards those who are happy. Is that different how you see it?
It's fairly similar. We would phrase it as love is wanting others to have happiness and its causes. I think the and its causes is very important, and compassion is wanting them to be free of dukkha and the causes of dukkha. Okay. But different traditions and different teachers may explain things differently.
But specifically in reference to what you said about the chocolate, when we generate, so metta is a pleasurable feeling that doesn't create suffering if we keep doing it again and again and again.
No, metta is a feeling that we have towards other living beings. We don't have metta towards chocolate.
That's not what sorry, I misspeaking.
I'm not.
The pleasant feeling of generating well-being for others won't transform into suffering if we continue to do it over and over again, unlike what we feel, the pleasant feeling of chocolate.
I see what you're saying. That the feeling of metta won't turn into suffering. If you have pure metta, it won't. If you have metta with strings attached, it will. Okay. Yeah. Anybody here ever had metta with strings attached? Anybody ever experienced other people's metta with strings attached? Okay. Yeah. That kind of metta we can leave behind. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, yes. I will do it. Thank you. See, I told you I'd forget. Is that knowing yourself well when you know that you will forget to do something that you want to do for somebody else? Okay. So he had asked for the lung, for the prostrations to the 35 Buddhas. So I'm going to read that just to give the lung. Yeah. You're supposed to offer a mandala, but it's okay. Yeah. I have enough things already. You don't need to give me your mandala. I'm joking. Okay. So you can just listen. Yeah, Namo Manjushriya, Namo Sushriya, Namo Tamashriya. So I, and say your name, throughout all times take refuge in the Gurus. I take refuge in the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. To the founder, the transcendent destroyer, the one thus gone, foe destroyer, the fully awakened one, the glorious conqueror from the Shakyas, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the great destroyer, destroying with Vajra essence, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the jewel radiating light, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the king with power over the Nagas, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the leader of the warriors, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious, blissful one, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the jewel fire, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the jewel moonlight, I bow down. To the one thus gone, whose pure vision brings accomplishments, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the jewel moon, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the stainless one, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious giver, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the pure one, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the bestower of purity, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the celestial waters, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the deity of the celestial waters, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious good, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious sandalwood, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the one of unlimited splendor, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious light, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious one without sorrow, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the son of the desireless one, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious flower, I bow down. To the one thus gone who understands reality, enjoying the radiant light of purity, I bow down. To the one thus gone who understands reality, enjoying the radiant light of the lotus, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious gem, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious one who is mindful, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious one whose name is extremely renowned, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the king holding the banner of victory over the senses, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious one who subdues everything completely, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious one in all battles, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious one gone to perfect self-control, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the glorious one who enhances and illuminates completely, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the jeweled lotus who subdues all, I bow down. To the one thus gone, the foe destroyer, the fully awakened one, the king with power over Mount Meru, always remaining in the jewel and the lotus, I bow down. All you 35 Buddhas and all the others, those thus gone, foe destroyers, fully awakened ones, and transcendent destroyers who are existing, sustaining, and living throughout the 10 directions of sentient beings' worlds. All you Buddhas, please give me your attention. In this life and throughout beginningless lives, in all the realms of samsara, I have created, caused others to create, and rejoiced at the creation of destructive karmas, such as misusing offerings to holy objects, misusing offerings to the Sangha, stealing the possessions of the Sangha of 10 directions. I have caused others to create these destructive actions and rejoiced at their creation. I have created the 5 heinous actions, caused others to create them, and rejoiced at their creation. I have committed the 10 non-virtuous actions, involved others in them, and rejoiced in their involvement. Being obscured by all this karma, I have created the cause for myself and other sentient beings to be reborn in the hells as animals, as hungry ghosts, in irreligious places, amongst barbarians, as long-lived gods, with imperfect tenses, holding wrong views, and being displeased with the presence of a Buddha. Now before these Buddhas, transcendent destroyers who have become transcendental wisdom, who have become the compassionate eye, who have become witnesses, who have become valid and see with their omniscient minds, I am confessing and accepting all these actions as negative. I will not conceal or hide them, and from now on I will refrain from committing these destructive actions. Buddhas and transcendent destroyers, please give me your attention. in this life and throughout beginningless lives in all the realms of samsara, whatever root of virtue I have created through even the smallest acts of charity, such as giving one mouthful of food to a being born as an animal, whatever root of virtue I have created by keeping pure ethical conduct, whatever root of virtue I have created by abiding in pure conduct, whatever root of virtue I have created by fully ripening sentient beings' minds, whatever root of virtue I have created by generating bodhicitta, whatever root of virtue I've created of the highest transcendental wisdom, bringing together all these merits of both myself and others, I now dedicate them to the highest of which there is no higher, to that even above the highest, to the highest of the high, to the higher of the high. I thus dedicate them completely to the highest, fully accomplished awakening. Just as the Buddhas and transcendent destroyers of the past have dedicated, just as the Buddhas and transcendent destroyers of the future will dedicate, and just as the Buddhas and transcendent destroyers of the present are dedicating, in the same way I make this dedication. I confess all my destructive actions separately and rejoice in all merits. I implore all the Buddhas to grant my request that I may realize the ultimate, sublime, highest transcendental wisdom. To the sublime kings of the human beings living now, to those of the past and to those who have yet to appear, to all those whose knowledge is as vast as an infinite ocean, with my hands folded in respect, I go for refuge. And then the general confession. Yeah. Wuhula means woe is me. All spiritual mentors, great Vajra holders, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who abide in the 10 directions, as well as all the Venerable Sangha, please pay attention to me. I, who am named, say your name, circling in cyclic existence since beginningless time until the present, overpowered by afflictions such as attachment, hostility, and ignorance, have created the 10 destructive actions by means of body, speech, and mind. I have engaged in the 5 heinous actions and the 5 parallel heinous actions. I have transgressed the precepts of individual liberation, contradicted the trainings of a bodhisattva, broken the tantra commitments. I have been disrespectful to my kind parents, spiritual mentors, spiritual friends, and those following the pure paths. I have committed actions harmful to the 3 jewels, avoided the holy Dharma, criticized the Arya Sangha, and harmed living beings. These and many other destructive actions I have done, have caused others to do, and have rejoiced in others' doing. In short, I have created many obstacles to my own higher rebirth and liberation, and have planted countless seeds for further wanderings in cyclic existence and miserable states of being. Now, in the presence of the spiritual mentors, the great Vajra holders, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who abide in the 10 directions, and the Venerable Sangha, I confess all of these destructive actions. I will not conceal them, and I accept them as destructive. I promise to refrain from doing these actions again in the future. By confessing and acknowledging them, I will attain and abide in happiness, while by not confessing and acknowledging them, true happiness will not come. Yeah, powerful. We have a lot to purify. Okay, so let's dedicate.